Sylvester Stallone walked calmly through the crowded halls of Riverside Steelworks, his eyes drifting across the towering machinery and the dozens of workers moving with mechanical precision. As he turned toward a quieter section of the factory floor, his pace slowed. Something had shifted in the air. Then he saw it. A scene that made the muscles in his jaw tighten. Malik Jefferson, an aging black worker with kind eyes and sun-browned hands, was struggling to lift and stack heavy iron parts around his station. His movements were slow, deliberate, not from laziness, but from a lifetime of labor weighing on his bones. Surrounding him were three large white men in grease-stained coveralls, their laughter sharp and cruel. Ricky, the ringleader, swatted the pieces from Malik's hands, sending them clattering to the floor. "What's the matter, old man? Can't keep up anymore?" Ricky's voice dripped with mockery, thick with unspoken venom. Chuck and Tony burst into laughter, their words laced with racial slurs delivered with disturbing ease. "Bet we'd hit quota faster without this old museum piece slowing us down," Tony sneered. "They only keep guys like him around for the brochure." Chuck added, "He's not a worker, he's a token." Each word struck deeper than the last. Malik didn't respond. He knelt slowly, hands trembling slightly, as he began to gather the scattered parts. His face remained calm, but the pain was unmistakable. The humiliation etched into his every motion. He didn't speak, not because he didn't want to, but because he had long learned that speaking often made things worse. The factory floor had heard these kinds of remarks before. No one ever stepped in. A few workers nearby cast uneasy glances, their eyes darting from Malik to the bullies and back. One young man slowly pulled out his phone, hands trembling, quietly recording what others pretended not to see. But no one intervened. Fear, habit, and years of silence kept them frozen. Most simply turned away, ashamed but afraid. Their stillness only added fuel to the cruelty unfolding before them. From behind a row of towering machines, Stallone stood watching. The shadows half covered his face, but his expression was stone. His fists clenched at his sides, veins taut with tension. His breathing remained steady, but his eyes, those hard, narrowed eyes, burned with the kind of restrained fury that only decades of injustice can cultivate. He said nothing, not yet. But inside him, a storm was forming, the kind that doesn't scream, it strikes. Then Ricky shoved Malik backward. The older man fell hard onto the concrete, the sound of his body hitting the floor echoing through the steel cathedral. The bully laughed louder. That was it. Stallone stepped out from the shadows, his presence sudden and solid, like a forgotten statue coming to life. The factory seemed to inhale. Every eye turned to him. The bullies froze. Ricky's smirk faded. Chuck's grin twitched. Tony's fingers stopped mid-point. They hadn't noticed him before. They did now. Stallone's voice was cold, measured, razor sharp. "You just made your last mistake. Last." Before we go any further, make sure to like this video and subscribe if you believe dignity is worth standing up for. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching. In the gray heart of Pittsburgh, where the skyline still whispered the ghosts of industry and the air forever carried a scent of steel, stood a fading giant, Riverside Steelworks. Once a crown jewel of American labor. Now it was just another factory trying to outrun the rust. The walls were thick with age. The lights flickered with fatigue. And the men who worked there had the look of people who'd given more than they'd ever gotten. The floor was alive with machines groaning, welding sparks spitting, and tired voices drowned beneath the hum of industry. This was where men lost time, lost backs, lost hearing, and kept working anyway. Through a row of double doors, a figure stepped into that symphony of sweat and smoke. Sylvester Stallone. Not the star, not the boxer, not the icon. Just a man, nearly 80, shoulders a little heavier, jawline still iron, eyes that had seen more than cameras could ever capture. He wore a dusty ball cap, flannel shirt, boots with salt in the laces, and moved with the quiet grace of someone who belonged here, even if most didn't recognize him at first. He wasn't here for publicity. He never was. He was walking the floor for a veterans labor fund he helped start, a way to give aging, out-of-work veterans a second shot at dignity. No red carpet, just grease-stained concrete. As he passed workstations, a few glances lingered. Some men did a double take, unsure. Others nodded politely, figuring he was some supervisor from corporate. He didn't care. He kept moving. He wasn't looking for attention. He was looking for something real. That's when he wandered into Bay 12, where the shadows ran deeper, and the lights buzzed like flies. Near the far corner, surrounded by towering shelves of metal parts and half-assembled frames, was a man working alone. Bent low, moving slow, but still moving. His name was Malik Johnson, age 62. A veteran, former Navy engineer. Worked at the plant for over 25 years. They said he never missed a shift, never called in, never raised his voice. A ghost to some, a legend to others. His face was lined, his skin toughened from decades of heat, smoke, and grit. He wore a dark blue work suit with oil stains on the knees, and his hands, large, cracked, steady, lifted each piece of steel like it still meant something. But Malik wasn't alone. Watching him, just a few feet away, were three men in matching coveralls. Younger, louder, sharper around the edges, but dull inside. Ricky Carter, the ringleader, broad-chested, late 30s, white, always chewing a toothpick and carrying a chip on his shoulder the size of a tow truck. Beyond him were Chuck and Tony, followers with too much time and too little empathy. The three of them had made it a game. Malik was the target. He was too old, too quiet, too black. That was enough. Ricky kicked at a piece of pipe Malik had just placed, letting it clang onto the ground. "Pick it up again, old-timer. Maybe you'll finally break a sweat." Malik didn't answer. He never did. Chuck mocked his posture, imitating Malik's slow walk with an exaggerated hunch. "Look at him, man. Can't even stand straight, let alone do a full shift." Tony chimed in. "He only still works here 'cause HR's scared to fire a black vet. Ain't that right, Malik?" Malik paused, just for a second, then quietly resumed stacking the rods. His silence wasn't weakness. It was experience. But silence doesn't protect you forever. Ricky stepped closer. Hey, you hear me? Or your ears rusted too? You're dead weight, old man. Everyone knows it. You should have retired 10 years ago, before you started holding us back. His voice wasn't angry. It was worse. It was amused. Around them, the other workers kept their eyes down. No one liked what they saw. But no one said a thing. The rule in factories like Riverside was simple: don't get involved. Ricky had connections. His cousin was a shift foreman. He knew just how far he could push before anyone pushed back. Malik picked one end of the pipe again, wholly, deliberately. But his hands trembled this time, not from fear, but from the weight of humiliation. Stallone stood 20 yards away, partially hidden behind a coil stack. His hands clenched at his sides. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just watched. Every word stabbed into something inside him, something old, something sharp, something tired of being silent. He'd seen this story before, not in scripts, in life, in Philly, in New York, in Detroit. Men who'd given everything, only to be mocked for surviving. Men who'd stayed quiet because fighting always cost more than swallowing it. And men like Ricky, entitled, unchecked, and drunk on their own noise. Tony grabbed one of Malik's boxes and dumped it on the ground. "Oops," he said. "Clumsy hands, Grandpa." Malik closed his eyes for just a second, then bent down again. Chuck whispered, "Betty fought in Nam, came home just to get laughed at. What a joke." Ricky snorted. "He probably thinks that hat makes him a hero. All it does is hide how tired he looks." Then Ricky shoved him. It wasn't a big shove, but it was enough. Malik fell backward, his back hitting the edge of a machine. He let out a grunt, one hand gripping his side. No one moved. No one helped. Until now. From the shadows, Stallone stepped forward. Stallone's boots echoed against the concrete as he walked out from behind the coil stack. No one said a word. The factory's mechanical symphony seemed to dim on its own. Sparks still flew, belts still turned, but every eye, every single worker who had pretended not to hear the insults or see the push, was now watching. He didn't rush. He didn't yell. There was no performance in his steps, only intent. The type of presence that doesn't ask for attention, but demands it all the same. He reached Malik first, offering a firm hand. Malik hesitated, blinking in surprise. It had been a long time since someone reached for him, not to push him down, but to lift him up. Stallone helped him to his feet gently, one hand on his back, the other steadying his elbow. "You all right?" he asked, voice low and even. Malik nodded, breath shallow, still unsure what was happening. Stallone turned to face the three men. Ricky's expression twisted from smug to confused. "Who the hell are you?" he said, stepping forward. "You a union rep or something?" Stallone didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than anything Ricky could throw. Chuck narrowed his eyes. "Wait a second. Ain't that—" Tony leaned toward Ricky and whispered something. Ricky's smirk returned, sharp and crooked. "Oh, I get it now. You think this is a movie. You think you're back in the ring, old man." Stallone's eyes didn't blink. His body didn't flinch. He took one step forward, then another. He wasn't posturing. He wasn't intimidating. He was just ready. Ricky puffed his chest. "You really gonna get in the middle of this?" he said, laughing. "Guy's been dead weight for a decade. Someone needed to tell him." Stallone spoke finally, his voice calm, but clear as steel. "You don't speak for this place," he said. "You don't speak for anyone but yourself." Ricky laughed harder. "Oh yeah? You think anyone's gonna back you up? This is how it is. Old men get in the way. He's just lucky I didn't do worse." Stallone's jaw flexed. His arms stayed at his side, but his shoulders squared. "You crossed the line," he said. "That's not teasing. That's not shop talk. That's hate. That's weakness dressed up as strength. And it stops now." Chuck muttered, "Or what?" Ricky stepped closer, now face to face with Stallone. He was taller, broader, younger. But none of that mattered. "You just made your last mistake," Stallone said. And as the last word left his mouth, Ricky swung. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't smart. It was angry and wild, and exactly what Stallone expected. Ricky's fist came in high, arcing right for Stallone's jaw. But Stallone ducked low, pivoted his hips, and before anyone could blink, he released it. The punch. The one that had become myth. The one that fans cheered in theaters and whispered about in gyms. But this wasn't Hollywood. This was real. And when Stallone's right fist connected with Ricky's jaw, it made a sound unlike any punch ever captured on film. Not a thud, not a snap, a crack, like something old being broken open. Ricky's head snapped sideways. His knees gave out. His body collapsed like scaffolding losing its spine. Chuck shouted and lunged. Tony grabbed a nearby wrench. Stallone didn't hesitate. He sidestepped Chuck, caught the man by his collar, and drove his elbow into his ribs with surgical precision. Chuck gasped, stumbled backward into a shelf, tools crashing behind him. Tony swung the wrench from behind, but Stallone turned just in time, caught the arc with both arms, twisted his torso, and sent Tony flying into a stack of crates. It wasn't choreographed, it wasn't pretty, but it was real, fast, brutal, controlled. The floor froze. Workers stared. Phones recorded. The silence that followed wasn't just shock, it was clarity. Malik stood still, eyes wide, lips parted but silent. No one had ever fought for him before. Not like this. Not without asking for something in return. Stallone looked around at the room, not for praise, but for confirmation that what just happened needed to happen. And he found it, in the faces of men and women who had watched injustice for too long and said nothing. Until now. At that moment, the plant manager, Martin Keyes, stormed in from the upstairs catwalk, face flushed, tie loosened. He had seen the last part of the fight. He didn't know what to make of it. "What the hell is going on down here?" he barked, voice brittle. Security followed, unsure who to cuff. One of the younger workers stepped forward, phone in hand, and silently played the video. No music, no editing. Just raw footage. Ricky mocking, pushing, slurring. Stallone stepping in. The punch. The fall. The truth. Martin's face paled. He looked around the room, then at Malik, whose shoulders still shook slightly. "Ricky Doyle, Chuck Reynolds, Tony Novak, you're done, son. Martin said, voice trembling but steady. Clean out your lockers. You'll be escorted out immediately. HR will contact you. Don't come back. Ricky groaned from the floor, still holding his face. You serious? You can't. Martin cut him off. You brought shame to this place. And you did it loud enough for the whole world to hear. He turned to Stallone. Sir, I don't know who you are, but I'm no one, Stallone said. Just a guy who hates watching good men be treated like garbage. Malik looked at him, something unspoken passing between them. A nod. A truth. Martin faced Malik next. Mr. Johnson, I owe you an apology. We all do. This should have never happened, and it should have been stopped a long time ago. The other workers began to shift. A few walked toward Malik. One placed a hand on his back. Another offered a bottle of water. One woman simply said, I'm sorry. Malik nodded, but said nothing. He wasn't ready. Not yet. But something had cracked open inside him. Not just bruises, but something deeper. Something long buried beneath decades of patience. Stallone turned to leave. No victory speech, no slow motion exit. Just footsteps echoing through steel and silence. As he neared the factory door, Malik called out, Hey! Stallone stopped, turned slightly. Why? Malik asked, voice low, but clear. Why did you do it? Stallone paused. Because sometimes the fight finds you. And when it does, you don't run. With that, he stepped into the cold Pittsburgh light, leaving behind a factory forever changed. In the days that followed, all Riverside Steelworks was no longer the same place it had been for decades. Something invisible had shifted in the air, in the way people walked past each other, in the way they made eye contact, in the silence that now carried a sense of awareness instead of avoidance. Stallone's footsteps were long gone, but the echo of that moment, of him stepping in, standing up, and saying enough, remained in every corner of the plant. No one said it aloud, but everyone felt it. The factory had finally looked itself in the mirror, and it couldn't unsee what it had become. Malik returned to work after a day of rest. The bruises were still there, faint yellow and purple along his ribs and shoulder. But they weren't the kind that weakened a man. They were reminders. As he walked across the floor that morning, people didn't look away like they used to. They looked up. They nodded. Some even smiled. A few offered a handshake. One young welder, who hadn't spoken to him in 3 years, handed him a coffee without a word. Malik took it, smiled faintly, and for the first time in a long time, felt like he belonged. Martin Keyes, the plant manager, called a full staff meeting at noon on Friday. The machines were shut off. The lines paused. Workers gathered in the main floor break area. Many still skeptical, others cautiously hopeful. Martin stood before them, not with a clipboard, not behind a podium, but beside Malik, who wore his work uniform like armor. Martin cleared his throat and began with what no one expected: a full public apology. He didn't read from notes. He didn't try to spin the incident. He simply said, what happened here should never have happened. And it didn't happen in silence. It happened while people watched and said nothing, including me. That ends today. He announced the formation of a new committee, one led not by management, but by the workers themselves, tasked with protecting workplace dignity, calling out misconduct, and building the kind of culture that wouldn't need a Hollywood icon to step in. Then, to everyone's surprise, he handed the floor to Malik. Malik looked around the room, eyes steady, voice clear. I didn't want attention. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to come to work, do my job, and go home like everyone else. But sometimes silence is louder than shouting. And the day someone finally stood up for me, it reminded me that I'm allowed to stand too. The room didn't erupt in applause. It didn't need to. The silence that followed was enough. It wasn't empty. It was full. Full of understanding. Full of shift. By that weekend, the story had already made its way online. The video, originally posted to a veterans support group forum, had gone viral. Not because of Stallone's name, though that helped, but because of the rawness. There was no soundtrack, no filters, just a quiet man being pushed past his limit, and another man deciding that watching wasn't just enough. News outlets picked it up. Cable shows debated it. Social media caught fire with hashtags like #Stand Like Stallone and #Justice for Malik. Most people didn't care what company it was or even where it happened. They saw themselves, their fathers, their co-workers, in Malik. They saw the moment the line was crossed, and they saw what it looked like when someone finally stepped over that line in the other direction. Stallone, for his part, didn't give interviews. He declined calls from late-night hosts, morning shows, and even a major magazine cover. When asked why, he simply said, "It wasn't about me then. It's not about me now." He didn't disappear entirely, though. A week after the incident, a thick manila envelope arrived at the plant's HR office. Inside was a handwritten note and a check for $50,000 made out to the Riverside Brotherhood Fund, with a note attached. Use this to train, support, and protect your people, especially the quiet ones. No publicity, no press release, just action. Malik kept the photo someone had snapped of him and Stallone standing side by side, shoulders close, both looking in the same direction, eyes tired but proud. He didn't frame it or put it on social media. He kept it in his locker, tucked behind an old Bible and a folded American flag. Every now and then, on breaks, he'd pull it out, look at it, and remember not the punch, not the fall, but the moment someone made it clear that he mattered. A month later, during the plant's quarterly safety and ethics briefing, a new training video was played. Produced in-house, narrated by volunteers from the shop floor, featuring real footage and real voices. It ended with a single sentence on screen. Respect isn't earned by the age, rank, or hour. It's earned by how we treat the people no one else sees. The factory wasn't perfect after that. Bullies didn't vanish. Fear didn't evaporate. But something had changed. Ricky, Chuck, and Tony were gone, and no one mourned their absence. In their place came quiet voices, growing louder, hands lifting to others instead of pushing them down. The culture had shifted, not because someone gave a speech, but because someone gave a damn. And far, from the buzz of the internet. In a modest one-story home on the edge of a working-class neighborhood, Stallone sat in his kitchen, reading a letter from a young man named Eric. It had been slipped into his trailer door weeks earlier and somehow followed him home. The letter read, "My dad worked at Riverside. He never stood up for anyone in his life, not because he didn't care, but because he was scared. After that day, he stood up for me when my teacher made a joke about my stutter. He said, 'If Stallone can step in for a stranger, I can step in for my son.' I just wanted to say thank you for giving him that courage." Stallone folded the letter slowly, placed it beside his coffee cup, and sat in the stillness for a long moment. He didn't smile. He didn't cry. He simply nodded to no one in particular, as if some old debt had finally been paid.